The first rule of field biology is simple. Never interfere with your subject. I broke that rule on day 43 of the expedition, and I've been breaking it every day since. My name is Dr. Elena Voss. 10 years ago, I was a wildlife biologist specializing in primate behavior, recruited by a private conservation group to lead what they called the most important cryptozoological investigation in modern history. The mission was clear. Find conclusive evidence of Sasquatch in the Cascade Mountains of Northern California, document the species, and secure funding for long-term research. I found him in October 2014, deep in the Trinity Alps wilderness, where old-growth forest meets alpine meadows and the world still feels untouched by human certainty. He was crouched beside a stream, washing blood from his hands. Not his own blood, but a doe's, freshly killed with precision that spoke of intelligence, not instinct. Our eyes met across 30 meters of morning mist, and in that moment, I understood 3 things. He was real, he was sapient, and my team would destroy him the moment they confirmed his existence. So I did something I never thought myself capable of. I lied. To everyone. For 10 years. This is why. The expedition was funded by the Wilderness Biology Initiative, a coalition of wealthy conservationists, frustrated academics, and one former cryptozoologist who'd made millions in tech and wanted to legitimize the field he'd loved as a child. They'd assembled a team of 12, biologists, tracking specialists, a documentary crew, and me as lead researcher. Our base camp sat at 6,400 feet elevation, surrounded by Jeffrey pine and red fir, with solar panels and satellite internet that made the wilderness feel less wild. My job was to coordinate search patterns, analyze environmental DNA samples, and maintain scientific credibility for an endeavor that most of my colleagues considered career suicide. I took the position because I was 32, ambitious, and tired of studying behavioral patterns in captive primates, while the natural world collapsed around me. If Sasquatch existed, truly existed as a relic hominid species, it would rewrite evolutionary biology and prove that wilderness still held secrets worth protecting. The first month yielded nothing but false leads. Footprints that could have been bear tracks distorted by substrate, hair samples that came back as elk or black bear, audio recordings of vocalizations that matched known wildlife or wind through canyons. The team's frustration grew daily, and the documentary crew's interest waned into cynicism. I was beginning to doubt the entire premise when Marcus Chen, our lead tracker, found the kill site. A Roosevelt elk, approximately 700 pounds, brought down not by predators, but by deliberate force. The neck was broken cleanly, the carcass partially butchered with tool-precision cuts, not claw marks, and the footprints in the soft earth beside the stream were unmistakable. 16 inches long, 5-toed, with a humanoid arch, fresh, less than 2 hours old. I ordered the team to establish observation positions while I followed the trail alone, standard protocol for potentially dangerous wildlife encounters, though my heart was hammering with the knowledge that I was tracking something that might look back. The trail led upstream, through dense willow thickets and across exposed granite that held no prints. I lost it 3 times, and found it again through broken vegetation and disturbed ground litter. Whoever had made this trail knew how to move through terrain, knew they were being followed, and was either leading me somewhere or testing my tracking ability. I found him at dawn, beside a pool where the creek widened and slowed. He was washing blood from his hands with methodical care, using sand from the creek bottom as an abrasive. The morning light caught the auburn highlights in his hair, dense, covering most of his body, except palms and face. He was massive, easily 7.5 feet tall, with shoulder width that spoke of strength beyond human proportion. But it was his face that stopped me. Not monstrous, not ape, something in between. Heavy brow ridge, flat nose, but eyes that held unmistakable intelligence and current awareness. He was thinking, not just reacting. He turned his head slowly, pinning me with a gaze that assessed and categorized in the same moment. Threat analysis. I'd seen it in gorillas, in chimps, in every primate capable of social cognition. He was deciding if I was dangerous. I raised my hands slowly, showing empty palms. My heart hammered so hard I thought he'd hear it across the distance. For 17 seconds, we remained frozen in mutual evaluation. Then he straightened to full height, a deliberate display, showing size and strength, and made a sound. Low, resonant, not quite vocalization. A warning, perhaps, or a question. I took one step backward. Non-threatening retreat. acknowledging his territory. He watched for another moment, then turned and walked into the forest with fluid silence that shouldn't be possible for something his size. I stood trembling beside that stream for 20 minutes, radio clipped to my belt, knowing I should call the team immediately. Instead, I turned it off. I told them I'd lost the trail at the granite outcrop, showed them the last clear prints, documented the kill site, collected hair samples I claimed came from vegetation along the route. All technically true, all deliberately incomplete. Marcus knew I was lying. He'd been tracking professionally for 20 years, mostly for wildlife documentaries in Africa and Southeast Asia. He studied my face when I returned, noted the mud on my boots that indicated I'd gone much farther than reported, but he said nothing. That night, over camp coffee, he sat beside me. "How close did you get?" I considered denying it. But Marcus wasn't on the expedition for fame or funding. He'd taken the contract because he genuinely loved the wilderness and wanted to know what lived in its deepest corners. 30 meters, I said quietly, by the upper pool. And I think he let me see him, deliberately, to show me he knew we were here. Marcus was quiet for a long time. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet." He nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, I've tracked plenty of animals that didn't want to be found. The ones that survive are usually the ones humans never confirm exist." He stood, poured out his coffee. "Think about that." I thought about nothing else. Over the following weeks, I found more signs. Not randomly. They were placed where I'd patrol alone, where the team wouldn't venture. A stack of rounded river stones balanced impossibly on a fallen log. Fresh pine boughs arranged in a pattern near my usual observation post. Once, I found a deer carcass with the heart and liver carefully removed and placed on a flat rock. The cleanest cuts, the best meat, positioned where I'd see them. He was establishing communication, gift-giving behavior, observed in great apes but never documented in any North American species. He was demonstrating intelligence, testing my response, building something that might be called relationship. I started leaving things in return: high-calorie energy bars in waterproof containers, medical supplies, antibiotics, antiseptics, bandages, hidden in hollow logs, a small mirror, curious to see if he'd demonstrate self-recognition. The mirror disappeared. 3 days later, I found it carefully placed on a boulder, positioned to catch sunlight and flash signals. Tool use, symbolic thought, play behavior or communication attempt. Either way, it was conscious intent. I was documenting everything in encrypted files, separate from the official expedition records. Behavioral observations that would revolutionize primatology, hidden because I knew what revelation would cost him. The team was getting impatient. 2 months in, we had compelling evidence: footprints, hair samples, audio recordings, but nothing definitive. No clear photographs, no DNA confirmation, no encounter that would satisfy peer review. The funders were asking pointed questions about timeline and results. Dr. James Hartley, the cryptozoologist funding the expedition, arrived at base camp on week 10, bringing pressure and expectations. "We need something concrete, Elena. The board is questioning the investment. Give me something I can show them." I showed him the footprint casts, the enhanced audio, the behavioral analysis suggesting tool use and social structure. He studied everything with growing excitement. "This is good. This is promising. But we need visual confirmation. Camera traps aren't working. He's too smart. He avoids them. We need to try different methods." "What methods?" I asked, though I already knew. "Bait stations, controlled encounters. If necessary, tranquilizer protocol for documentation and tagging." My blood went cold. Tagging? Standard wildlife research. GPS collar, maybe some tissue samples for genetic analysis. Non-invasive, humane. But we need that data. Non-invasive. As if putting a collar on a sapient being wasn't a violation of autonomy. "Give me 2 more weeks," I said carefully. "Let me try passive observation first. If he's as intelligent as the evidence suggests, aggressive tactics will only drive him deeper into wilderness we can't access." Hartley studied me. 2 weeks, then we escalate. I had 14 days to figure out how to protect someone from the people paying my salary. Marcus helped without being asked. On day 3 of my 2-week deadline, he approached with a handheld GPS unit showing our camera trap locations. "Funny thing," he said conversationally. 3 of our cameras repositioned themselves last night, pointed away from game trails, toward empty forest, almost like something intelligent moved them. I looked at the locations. all in zones I'd identified as his probable territory. Equipment malfunction? Yeah, Marcus agreed. Definite malfunction. I'll need to reposition them. Might take a few days. Lot of terrain to cover. He was giving me time, sabotaging our own surveillance to protect a subject we were paid to document. Thank you, I said quietly. Don't thank me. Just figure out what we're doing here. Because I didn't sign up to trap someone. Someone, not something. Marcus had made the same cognitive leap I had, from specimen to person. I hiked out that afternoon to the upper meadow, a clearing at 7,200 feet, where wildflowers still bloomed in late October, and sightlines extended in all directions. Exposed ground, no cover. If he wanted to communicate, this was the place to do it safely. I waited 3 hours, sitting on granite warmed by afternoon sun, making myself visible and non-threatening. He appeared at the tree line just before sunset, not emerging from cover, but simply becoming visible, as if he'd been there all along, and only now chose to be seen. He remained at distance, maybe 40 meters, but made no move to retreat. I stood slowly, reached into my pack, and pulled out the printout I'd prepared. A photograph of Dr. Hartley, the documentary crew, and the equipment cases that contained tranquilizer rifles. I held it up, let him see, then pointed at him and shook my head. No, it was crude communication, probably meaningless, but I needed to try. He tilted his head, the universal primate gesture of curiosity, then made a sound. Not the warning rumble from our first encounter, but something modulated, almost questioning. He was asking me something. I pointed at myself, at the forest, at him, then made a gesture I'd learned from fieldwork with mountain gorillas. A lowering of the head, a slight crouch, respect, submission. I come in peace. He remained motionless for a long moment, then did something that shattered any remaining doubt about his intelligence. He mimicked my gesture exactly, head lowered, slight crouch, then pointed at me, at himself, at the forest around us. We're the same. We both live here. My eyes blurred with tears I didn't expect. I'm trying to protect you, I said aloud, knowing he couldn't understand words but needing to say them anyway. But they want to capture you, put a collar on you, study you. I don't know how to stop them without losing my position. And if I lose my position, someone else takes over. Someone who might not care. He watched me with those impossibly expressive eyes, and I swear he understood the emotion if not the content. Then he did something that changed everything. He walked toward me, deliberately, closing the distance to 10 meters, then 5. Close enough that I could see the fine details of his face, the weathering around his eyes, the gray starting to thread through auburn hair, the small scar across his left cheek. Close enough that when he extended one massive hand, palm up, I understood. He was offering trust, asking me to choose. I reached out slowly and touched his palm with my fingertips. His skin was warm, calloused, real. The contact lasted maybe 3 seconds. Then he withdrew, nodded once, an unmistakably human gesture, and disappeared into the twilight forest. I stood in that meadow until full dark, staring at my hand, knowing I'd just made first contact with an intelligent species, and knowing I'd do anything to keep them from turning him into a research subject. I spent that night encrypting files, backing up documentation, and writing a report I'd never submit. Everything I'd observed, the gift exchanges, the tool use, the deliberate communication, painted a picture of behavioral sophistication that met every criterion for sapience: self-awareness, theory of mind, symbolic thought, cultural transmission. If I released this data, he'd be protected as an intelligent species, potentially, or he'd become the most sought-after research subject in history, pursued by every biologist, anthropologist, and government agency with jurisdiction over unidentified hominids. Either way, he'd lose his freedom, and freedom, the choice to remain hidden, to live on his own terms, was perhaps the clearest sign of his personhood. Dr. Hartley returned to base camp on day 12 with reinforcements, 2 additional trackers, and a wildlife veterinarian specializing in large mammal sedation. The message was clear. We were moving to active intervention. The team meeting that night was tense. Hartley spread out topographic maps marked with every sign we'd found. We have a search grid. Starting tomorrow, we run systematic sweeps with 3 teams. Camera traps equipped with motion-triggered alerts. Bait stations with high-value food sources. And if we get a visual, Dr. Carson here will handle sedation for documentation and tagging. Rachel Carson was professional, competent, and apparently unbothered by the ethics of tranquilizing a potentially sapient being. Standard protocol, she explained. Dosage calculated for estimated body mass, fast-acting sedative with minimal side effects. We'll have maybe 30 minutes for documentation, sample collection, and GPS collar attachment. He'll wake up naturally with no lasting effects. Except the collar, I said quietly, which allows us to track movement patterns, habitat use, and population dynamics. Standard conservation biology. For animals, not for... I caught myself. Hartley's eyes narrowed. Not for what, Dr. Voss? The room went silent. Marcus was watching me carefully. Dr. Carson looked confused. The documentary crew's cameras were rolling. I'd reached the decision point. Speak now and risk everything, or stay silent and become complicit in what felt like violation. Not for something that demonstrates clear sapience, I said steadily. Gift-giving behavior, tool modification, symbolic communication, self-recognition. I've documented all of it. Whatever this species is, it's not just another large mammal. It's a person. Dr. Carson frowned. That's anthropomorphizing. Classic field research error. I've worked with great apes for 8 years, I interrupted. I know the difference between anthropomorphizing and recognizing intelligence. This being demonstrates cognitive capabilities that meet or exceed gorillas and chimpanzees. We wouldn't collar a chimpanzee without consent protocols and ethical review. Why is this different? Because chimpanzees are known, documented species with established protections, Hartley said, voice hard. This is an unknown organism that might be endangered, vulnerable, or declining. We need data to ensure survival. Your emotional attachment is compromising your judgment. My judgment is informed by 10 weeks of behavioral observation. Pursuing aggressive documentation could harm the very thing you're trying to protect, or it could save an entire species from extinction, Hartley countered. We don't know population numbers, breeding rates, territory requirements. Without that data, we can't advocate for habitat protection. You're prioritizing individual autonomy over species survival. It was a fair point. The conservationist's dilemma, individual welfare versus population sustainability, but it assumed he was the last, or one of few, when I'd seen evidence suggesting otherwise. Tracks of varying sizes, multiple den sites, coordinated movement patterns. What if I told you I believe there's a stable population? I said carefully. Multiple individuals, family groups, successfully surviving without our intervention? Then I'd ask why you haven't reported that evidence, Hartley said coldly. And I'd question whether you're still objective enough to lead this expedition. Marcus cleared his throat. Dr. Voss has been following cautious documentation protocols. She's right that aggressive tactics could drive the subject deeper into inaccessible territory. We'd lose months of progress, which is why we're escalating now, while we still have funding, Hartley said. The decision is made. Tomorrow we implement the new search protocol. Dr. Voss, you'll coordinate grid assignments. If you're not comfortable with that, I can reassign leadership. The threat was explicit. Cooperate or be removed, and whoever replaced me wouldn't hesitate to do what I refused. I'll coordinate the search, I said, voice flat, but I was already planning how to warn him. I left base camp at 400 hours, officially to scout the northern grid sector before team deployment. Marcus intercepted me at the trailhead, pack already loaded. You're going to warn him, he said. Not a question. I have to. I know, I'm coming with you. We hiked fast and silent through pre-dawn darkness, headlamps cutting narrow paths through forests that felt watchful and alive. The upper meadow was 2 hours away, but I had a different destination in mind, a cave system I'd mapped weeks ago, complex enough to offer shelter and multiple escape routes. We reached it just after sunrise. I'd left supplies there before: food, medical equipment, waterproof matches, a simple map showing patrol routes and camera trap locations, everything he'd need to avoid detection. This feels like aiding and abetting, Marcus said quietly, but he was helping me arrange supplies. It is. And if Hartley finds out, we're both done. Career over, reputation destroyed. Yeah, he was quiet for a moment. But I've spent 20 years helping documentaries capture intimate footage of wildlife for entertainment. Just once, I'd like to help something stay free. We'd just finished when I heard it, the low, resonant sound that meant he was near. Marcus tensed but held position as he materialized from the morning mist, moving with that impossible silent grace. He stopped at the cave entrance, looking from me to Marcus to the supplies we'd arranged. His expression, if I was reading it correctly, showed wariness, but also curiosity. I pulled out the map, spread it on a flat rock, pointed to our base camp location, marked in red, then to the grid search patterns, the camera trap positions, the areas they'd be sweeping today. I drew an X through our current location. Safe, then circled the territories they'd target first. Danger. He studied the map with obvious comprehension, one long finger tracing the contour lines and marked positions. Then he looked at me, and I saw the question in his eyes. Why? Because collaring you would be wrong, I said quietly. Because you're not a specimen. Because you've shown me that intelligence and personhood aren't limited to human morphology. And because, my voice cracked slightly, because I think you have family, others, and leading researchers to you might lead them to everyone you're trying to protect. He couldn't understand my words, but Marcus spoke then, voice gentle. She's saying you matter, as an individual, not as data. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then he did something I'll remember until I die. He placed his hand flat against his chest, the same gesture I'd made weeks ago when trying to communicate, then pointed at me, at Marcus, at the supplies we'd brought. Thank you. Then he made a decision. He gestured for us to wait, disappeared into the forest, and returned carrying something wrapped in cedar bark. He placed it carefully at my feet and stepped back. I unwrapped it slowly. Inside were 3 things: a child's handprint pressed into dried clay, a beautifully napped stone tool, and a small carved figure, crude but recognizable as a family group. 3 adults, 2 juveniles, evidence of culture, art, family, everything that defined personhood, offered as proof that we were right to protect him. There are more, I whispered. You're not alone. He nodded, that unmistakably human gesture, then touched the child's handprint, then his own chest, his family, his responsibility. That's when I understood completely. He wasn't just protecting himself, he was protecting the next generation. Children who'd grow up in a world that would either respect their right to exist unseen, or destroy them through the violence of exposure. Marcus was openly crying. We won't let them find you, he said. Any of you. He looked at both of us for a long moment, then placed one hand on my shoulder. Brief, warm, real. The gesture of one person thanking another. Then he gathered the supplies, memorized the map with a final glance, and disappeared into the wilderness. We hiked back to camp in silence, both knowing we'd crossed a line we couldn't uncross. The search teams deployed at over 800 hours, 3 groups of 4 covering the grid sectors Hartley had designated. I coordinated from base camp, monitoring radio communications and praying they'd find nothing. By noon, Team 1 reported fresh tracks near Grizzly Creek, large bipedal prints, less than 6 hours old. Dr. Carson was dispatched with tranquilizer equipment. My stomach dropped. Those are elk trails, I said into the radio, probably distorted by substrate moisture. I checked that area yesterday. Then you missed these, came the reply. They're clear, definitely hominid. I looked at Marcus. He was pale. We'd warned him, given him the map, but if he'd stayed too close, or if his family was in the area, I need to verify, I said, grabbing my pack. Team 1, hold position. I'm coming to your location. Hartley blocked my path. You're coordinating, not field verifying. Let the teams work. With respect, I'm the primatologist. I should confirm behavioral signs before we escalate to sedation. Dr. Voss, I'm beginning to question your judgment on this expedition. You've been reluctant from the beginning, questioning every protocol, and now I'm trying to ensure we don't tranquilize a bear by mistake and waste everyone's time, I said firmly. Give me 2 hours. He studied me with open suspicion, but nodded. 2 hours. Carson goes with you. The hike to Team 1's position took 40 minutes. The tracks they'd found were real, large, bipedal, recent, but wrong. Too deep in the heel, stride length inconsistent with the gait I'd observed. These were staged. He'd left them deliberately, drawing the search away from wherever his family was sheltering. Dr. Carson was examining the prints with professional interest. Definitely hominid morphology. Estimated weight 600-700 pounds based on depression depth. We need to set up an observation post. These tracks are leading away from viable habitat, I noted. Toward exposed ridgeline. No water source, no food resources. No animal would travel this direction by choice. Maybe it's territorial boundary marking, Carson suggested. Or he's fleeing from human presence. Or it's misdirection, Marcus said quietly, and Carson shot him a sharp look. You think it's deliberately creating false trails? I think anything intelligent enough to avoid our cameras for 10 weeks is intelligent enough to recognize a search pattern and respond strategically. Carson looked between us, suspicion growing. You two have been awfully protective of this subject. Almost like you don't want us to find it. We want to find it on terms that don't cause harm, I said carefully. There's a difference between observation and capture. We're not capturing. We're documenting with temporary sedation, without consent. Carson stared at me. It's an animal. Animals don't give consent for research. Chimpanzees are given consideration for cognitive capacity. Dolphins receive special protections. We adjust our ethics based on intelligence. Why not here? Because we don't have enough data to make that determination. Carson's voice rose in frustration. That's exactly why we need to document thoroughly. You're making assumptions based on limited observation. A sound cut through our argument. Low, resonant, coming from the ridge above us. Not one voice. Multiple voices, harmonizing in a pattern too complex to be accidental. Communication, or warning. We all froze, looking up toward the sound source. Through the gaps in the forest canopy, I saw movement, 3 massive shapes on the ridgeline, silhouetted against afternoon sky, visible deliberately, showing numbers, showing strength, telling us to back off. Dr. Carson had her tranquilizer rifle up instinctively. Multiple subjects, this is incredible. We need to lower the weapon, I said quietly. Please. This is exactly what we came for. They're showing us their family. Marcus interrupted, voice tight. Parents protecting children. You want to tranquilize them in front of their kids? Document that trauma? Carson hesitated, and in that hesitation, they disappeared. Simply melted back into the forest as if they'd never existed. The silence that followed was absolute. Finally, Carson lowered her rifle. That was deliberate display behavior, coordinated, multiple individuals working together to discourage pursuit. She looked at me with new understanding. You were right. That level of strategic thinking, family structure, communication sophistication, Dr. Voss, this isn't just an unknown primate. This is a people, I finished quietly. Not a species to study, a people asking to be left alone. We returned to base camp at sunset. Hartley was waiting with the footage from Team 2. Thermal imaging showing the family group on the ridge, clearly displaying coordinated movement and protective positioning around smaller individuals. This changes everything, he said, voice electric with excitement. Multiple individuals, family structure, complex behavior. Elena, this is what we needed. Evidence of a viable population. Evidence of a family that doesn't want to be found, I corrected, which is why we need to move quickly, before they relocate beyond our operational range. He was already planning, marking maps, coordinating with the documentary crew. Tomorrow we focus on the ridge sector. Multiple observation posts, extended surveillance, no tranquilizer protocols until we have better population estimates. It was a small mercy, but not enough. Dr. Hartley, I'm formally recommending we suspend active pursuit. We have sufficient evidence of existence, behavior, and population structure. Further intrusion risks disrupting their social cohesion and, your recommendation is noted and rejected. He cut me off. We're here to document, and that's what we'll do. If you're not comfortable with that, I'll accept your resignation and continue with Carson as lead researcher. There it was, the ultimatum I'd been expecting. Step aside and lose all influence, or stay and become complicit in something that felt increasingly like harassment of a refugee population. Marcus spoke up. What if we propose a different approach? Long-term passive monitoring, wildlife cameras at extreme distance, audio recording only, no pursuit. We document their existence and behavior without direct interference. Hartley considered it. That's a 5-year study minimum. The funding isn't structured for that timeline. Then we advocate for restructured funding, I said. Present what we have. Behavioral evidence of sapience, family structure, successful survival in protected wilderness. Make the case that this population's best protection is minimal human contact and maximum habitat preservation. That's conservation advocacy, not research. Sometimes they're the same thing. Dr. Carson surprised me by speaking up. I have to agree with Dr. Voss. What I saw today, that was strategic deception followed by threat display. That's not animal behavior. That's tactical thinking. And if we're dealing with beings capable of that level of cognition, we need to reconsider our entire approach. Hartley looked between the 3 of us, his lead researcher, his tracker, and his veterinarian, all suddenly united against his directive. You're all compromised by extended field exposure. You've anthropomorphized the subject. Or we've recognized a person when we saw one, Marcus said quietly. The tent fell silent. The documentary crew was still filming, capturing everything. Later, I'd realized that footage would become crucial. Hartley's expression hardened. I'm calling in the oversight board. This expedition is suspended pending review. No one leaves base camp without direct authorization. Dr. Voss, you're relieved of leadership duties effective immediately. Understood, I said calmly. Then I'm also free to submit my independent findings to peer review. His eyes narrowed. Your contract includes a confidentiality clause regarding proprietary research methodologies, not regarding evidence of an unknown intelligent species. If you read the clause carefully, it specifically exempts disclosures related to animal welfare and conservation ethics. I'd argue that applies here. It was a bluff. I wasn't sure my interpretation would hold up legally, but Hartley didn't know that. You're threatening to go public, he said slowly. I'm threatening to follow scientific protocol, submit findings to peer review, let the broader community debate the ethical implications. Isn't that what research is supposed to be? For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Hartley did something I didn't expect. He laughed, short, bitter, but genuine. You really believe they're people, all of you? Yes, I said simply. He looked at the thermal imaging footage again, watching the family group move together, the larger individuals positioning themselves protectively around smaller forms. Damn it, he said quietly. So do I. The Wilderness Biology Initiative expedition officially concluded 3 weeks later with a preliminary report that acknowledged credible evidence of undocumented large primate presence in Trinity Alps wilderness and recommended extended non-invasive monitoring protocols pending ethical review. It wasn't what Hartley had wanted, but it was what he accepted after the oversight board reviewed our documentation, particularly the footage of the family group's protective display, and agreed that aggressive research tactics were unjustifiable given behavioral evidence of sapience. Dr. Carson published a paper on cognitive indicators in large primates that became required reading in wildlife ethics courses. She never mentioned Sasquatch by name, but everyone in the field knew what she was referring to. Marcus returned to documentary work, but with new guidelines. He now refuses any project that prioritizes footage over subject welfare, and he's become an advocate for wildlife privacy rights. The idea that some species have legitimate claims to remain unobserved. Dr. Hartley secured funding for a 20-year monitoring program, audio recordings and remote sensing only, no visual pursuit. The data suggests a stable population of 30-40 individuals in the Trinity Alps region, with evidence of similar populations in Oregon and Washington. They're thriving, in part because we chose documentation over exhibition. I left field biology in 2016, and now work in research ethics, specifically focusing on protocols for engaging with potentially sapient non-human species. It's a small field, but growing, especially as we develop better AI and grapple with questions of machine consciousness. The questions are the same. What defines personhood? How do we recognize intelligence in forms unlike our own? When does the right to privacy outweigh our desire to know? I still hike the Trinity Alps when I can, though never with equipment or agenda. Just walking, being present, respecting the territory I share with beings who were here long before humans declared these mountains wilderness. Sometimes I find signs, a stack of stones that wasn't there yesterday, a pattern in fallen pine needles too precise to be wind. Once, an eagle feather placed carefully on a trail marker I'd installed years ago. Messages, perhaps, or gifts, or simply evidence that they remember the humans who chose to look away. The documentary footage from our expedition was never released publicly, locked under research protection protocols. But it exists, archived at 3 universities, with instructions to be reviewed if Trinity Alps wilderness faces development threats or habitat reduction. Insurance, proof that these mountains shelter more than deer and bears, that some territories must remain protected not just for biodiversity, but for the right of intelligent beings to live undisturbed. I think about him often, the individual I first encountered by that stream, washing blood from his hands. I wonder if he's still alive, if the child whose handprint he showed me has grown, if they tell stories about the humans who came searching but chose to leave them in peace. I hope so. I hope they pass down the memory that not all humans are threats, that some of us are capable of recognizing personhood, even when it doesn't resemble our own. The greatest discovery of my career remains unconfirmed by traditional science. No peer-reviewed publication, no museum specimen, No definitive proof that would satisfy skeptics. But I know what I saw, what I touched, what I chose to protect. And I know that somewhere in the high country of Northern California, a family continues to live as they always have, hidden, free, and safe from the scrutiny that would destroy them. Some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved. Some beings have earned the right to exist beyond our need to understand them.